Ghadeer Khumm.
Some believe that the number of Muslims joining the Prophet exceeded 100,000.
غدیر خم
حديث غدير خم.
غدیر خم قصه طولانی است که انتهای قصه همان غدیر خم هست.
كلمة غدير خم دي ممكن تعيش وتموت كسني عندك 70-80 سنة عمرك ما سمعت عن غدير خم دي أبدا أبدا.
Ghadeer Khumm is a sacred landmark where the Holy Prophet delivered one of his most important and sensitive sermons to thousands of Muslims. In this sermon, the Prophet announced Imam Ali alayhi salam as his successor in leading the Muslims. The Prophet ordered the Muslims to swear their allegiance to Imam Ali, to honor and uphold his appointment. Despite the exceptional importance of Ghadeer Khumm, its exact location remains unknown. After the Prophet's demise, even in the wake of misinformation and hostility against his successor, the sermon at Ghadeer Khumm remained a formative event honored by all Muslims. There is no other Islamic event during the life of the Holy Prophet that could compete with Ghadeer Khumm in terms of the corroboration and authenticity of narrations surrounding the event. Ghadeer Khumm harbors many mysteries in its holy lands. These mysteries motivated us to locate this lost, significant landmark and uncover its secrets. To find the exact location of Ghadeer Khumm, we must first understand the literal meaning of the word Ghadeer. In Arabic, the word Ghadeer means a natural pond that acts as a reservoir. The stored water in a Ghadeer typically does not last long, especially during the warmer season. In the harsh deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, Ghadeers are regarded as precious resources for locals and travelers alike. There are two explanations for the origin of the word Ghadeer. The first is that the word Ghadeer is derived from the root word mughadara, which in Arabic means departure or leaving. This can be understood to imply that floods transiently fill the Ghadeer. The second explanation is that Ghadeer originated from the root word ghadr, which means deception in Arabic. This alludes to the treacherous nature of a Ghadeer, in that stumbling across one may lead an individual to believe they can come back to it, only to find it dry upon their return. Among numerous Ghadeers that exist in the Arabian Peninsula, our mission was to find and locate a specific Ghadeer, known as Ghadeer Khumm. The location of Ghadeer Khumm and all historical resources has been mentioned to be within the vicinity of Juhfa, located between Mecca and Medina. Juhfa is currently located near Rabigh, a city on the shore of the Red Sea. The topography of the region clearly illustrates the existence of dry watercourses that could collect precipitation runoff from the valleys and spill over to the Red Sea. The construction of Wadi Rabigh Dam in this region represents the significance of storing and managing water runoff. Therefore, Ghadeer Khumm is somewhere within this long, dry watercourse. But where exactly? Online searches return numerous videos alleging the discovery of the exact location of Ghadeer Khumm in one side of this vast region. However, a common flaw among these videos is the lack of reasoning or justification as to why any of those locations could be Ghadeer Khumm. Confirming the exact location of Ghadeer Khumm requires more research and deeper study. Thus, we intended to reveal the exact location of this holy site for the first time, using reason and state-of-the-art scientific research. Before locating Ghadeer Khumm, it is important to examine the historical site of Juhfa and further understand its significance. Juhfa was a renowned site during the life of the Holy Prophet. Ghadeer Khumm has been mentioned in its vicinity in all available historical resources. Thus, finding the exact location of Juhfa is a major step in locating Ghadeer Khumm. Juhfa is among the few miqat sites where pilgrims to Mecca stop and perform prayer rituals, including wearing white garments and reciting the labaiks. Historically, Juhfa was known as the miqat for pilgrims from Egyptian and Syrian regions, as it was located on their way to Mecca. According to research conducted by Muhammad Baqir Najafi, the current location of the miqat of Juhfa is different from its historical site. The current miqat was built outside the old Juhfa. This begs the question as to the whereabouts of the old Juhfa. The same research suggests the old Juhfa was located northwest of the current miqat, in a place known as Ghadeer Khumm. The ruins at Ghadeer Khumm indicate the existence of a once prosperous town. The tall walls of this fort had provided a safe haven for travelers and pilgrims in the early Islamic centuries. So, how did this town lose its prosperity and turn to ruin? According to Najafi, this happened after the downfall of the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt, who had brought the Juhfa area under their control. The Fatimids honored the holy sermon at Ghadeer Khumm. Therefore, the prosperity of Juhfa, the main town in the vicinity of Ghadeer Khumm, was of importance to them. After their downfall, time took its toll. Juhfa lost its significance as the Egyptian and Syrian pilgrims, who would travel by ships, would not burden themselves to physically attend Juhfa to perform their pilgrimage rituals. Instead, they performed the rituals aboard their ships as they passed by Juhfa. Thus, Juhfa gradually lost its prosperity. Instead, the port and city of Jeddah, located within the vicinity of Mecca, grew and flourished. Finding the exact location of the old Juhfa, we could now focus on finding the precise location of Ghadeer Khumm within its vicinity. The next step is to explore how the holy site of Ghadeer Khumm has been described in historical resources. Explorers and historians who visited Ghadeer Khumm in the early Islamic centuries have described their observations by citing three main features of this holy site, including the spring, the pond, and the mosque of Ghadeer Khumm. The spring was regarded as one of the main features of Ghadeer Khumm throughout history. However, there is no historical evidence to prove its concurrent existence at the time of the sermon at Ghadeer Khumm, when the Prophet and the Muslims visited this land. The pond was indeed the famous Ghadeer of this site, and is the reason it was named Ghadeer Khumm. The Holy Prophet deliberately guided the Muslims to travel toward this Ghadeer in order to hold this esteemed sermon upon its grounds. The water stored in Ghadeer Khumm was a precious resource for the thousands of Muslims attending the event, allowing them to quench their thirst and endure the particularly hot day. The Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm was built by the Muslims upon the Holy Prophet's pulpit to honor his sermon and presence at this site. To find the exact geographical coordinates of the spring, we can refer to the itinerary of Sheikh Dr. Abdul Hadi Fazli, a great scholar from Saudi Arabia, who conducted 2 field trips to Ghadeer Khumm in January 1982 and January 1989. His personal research and field observations about the geography and the history of Ghadeer Khumm were later compiled and published in a book titled Ghadeer Khumm: Historical Research and Field Investigation. In the appendix of this book, there is an invaluable map that serves as the most authentic resource as to the location of Ghadeer Khumm's spring. This map was prepared by Fawad, Sheikh Abdul Hadi Fazli's son, and reflects Fawad's latest journey to this site in December of 2004. We followed this map to effectively find the coordinates of the spring and referred to the satellite images available on Google Earth to match the map to the physical geography of the area. For a better result, we reverted the time of the satellite imagery to December 2005, which is the oldest clear satellite image from the region in Google Earth, and also the closest available image to the time the map was created. Immediately apparent are all the spatial features shown in the map that can be found and matched in the aerial image of the region. Validating the placement of the spring in Ghadeer Khumm at this location is consistent with other videos and images taken from the spring available on the web.
ये मुकाम गदीर, ये वो चश्मा। ये वो चश्मे से खजूर है।
تمشي في الارض المصخور ما تروح. شوف مكتوبها غدير خم.
هو كمكان محقق هو هذا المكان. الجماعه اللي قاعدين يتنقلون الصور وكذا،
هذه المزرعه اللي
ذاك المكان
300 سنه
كغدير يعني بوجود الماء.
Finding the exact location of Ghadeer Khumm spring was exciting and encouraging. However, our excitement was short-lived. We quickly discovered in newer satellite images that this historical landmark has been completely destroyed. The Hadamine high-speed railway that operates between Mecca and Medina passes exactly through the spring and led to its complete demolition. The timing of this demolition is dated between late 2010 and early 2011. The focus of our research then shifted to the second historical feature of Ghadeer Khumm, the pond. Reportedly, the pond is the famous Ghadeer of this area. Sheikh Abdul Hadi Fazli has explicitly mentioned in his book that he has not seen the pond of Ghadeer Khumm in his field observations because it had purportedly been destroyed by the time of his field research. Our further investigations using conventional satellite imagery, available since the 1980s, confirmed that the pond of Ghadeer Khumm no longer exists in the region. However, this pond was observed a decade earlier by Atik ibn Qais Biladi, a famous native researcher and geographer from Saudi Arabia. He visited the site of Ghadeer Khumm in March 1973 during his expedition to investigate the Holy Prophet's migration trail from Mecca to Medina. His field observations from the pond of Ghadeer Khumm, documented in his book, On the Migration Path, contains useful information. In his book, Biladi explicitly describes Ghadeer Khumm as a pond that stores water all year round. He supports this claim with the fact that he had visited the site during a very dry year, yet the pond had enough water storage. Now that we know that the pond of Ghadeer Khumm existed contemporarily in our lifetime, we sought to locate its exact landmark. Detailed study of historical resources suggests that the pond and the spring of Ghadeer Khumm should have been in close proximity to one another. It is explicitly mentioned in historical accounts that the water flow from the spring ended at the pond. This is unlikely to happen if the pond and spring were located far from each other, due to the limited flow from the spring and very high temperatures of the region. In addition, the fact that explorers and historians throughout history who visited Ghadeer Khumm have mentioned all three features, including the spring, pond, and mosque, also implies that these three features were within a reasonably short distance from each other. Atik ibn Qais Biladi's field observations corroborate that the spring and the pond of Ghadeer Khumm should have been within close proximity. He had measured the distance he drove by car from Qasr Alia to the pond of Ghadeer Khumm as 8 kilometers. Observing the satellite images of the region, we concluded that the distance of 8 kilometers from Qasr Alia corresponds to the location of Ghadeer Khumm spring. Thus, the pond of Ghadeer Khumm should also be within this vicinity. The fact that the spring and pond of Ghadeer Khumm were close to each other helps us to narrow our search area. However, we would still require more evidence to identify the exact location of the pond. This is impossible without a map or aerial imagery of the area prior to the destruction of the pond. We know that the pond was destroyed sometime after Atik ibn Qais Biladi observed it in 1973, but before Sheikh Abdul Hadi Fazli noticed its disappearance in 1982. Further research and study guided us to unique images taken by US intelligence and spy satellites, known as KH. KH satellites were a series of satellites launched in the 60s and 70s during the peak of the Cold War to monitor the Soviet Union's military activity. These satellites were ahead of their time technologically. KH satellites served as strong telescopes, orbiting the Earth and taking pictures. They would then send these pictures to the Earth using parachutes. The images taken by these satellites have been gradually declassified since 1995 and became available to the public. They provide historically landmark aerial imagery of the Earth's surface. Our access to several key images from KH that provide coverage surrounding Ghadeer Khumm's area is the key to solving our challenge to locate the destroyed pond. Fortunately, one of these images was taken in March of 1973, when Atik ibn Qais Biladi had visited the area. Our exploration of KH images directed our attention to a small but dense orchard located about 200 meters southeast of the spring. These trees could not possibly have existed in such a dry, unforgiving environment unless they were being fed by a constant source of water. Thus, these trees would have been necessarily located within the vicinity of Ghadeer Khumm's pond. Our discovery of the exact location of Ghadeer Khumm's pond is consistent with Biladi's field observations. He described Ghadeer Khumm as a pond located within the dry watercourse, on the side of the valley to the west. He cited the existence of a few orchards near the pond. The orchards had approximately 45 date trees that belonged to the locals. Also, the ruins of a historical site northwest of the pond correspond to the city that Biladi had found both west and northwest of Ghadeer Khumm. He described it as a ruined city, with 3 forts or palaces, with crescent shapes that are buried under the sand. Furthermore, our findings are consistent with the opinions of Sheikh Abdul Hadi Fazli, as he believed the spring was located northwest of Ghadeer Khumm. What became of Ghadeer Khumm's pond that led to its destruction? The answer is found in one of the KH satellite's high-quality images taken in 1978. In this image, it is apparent that the construction of flood control practices within the dry watercourse, as well as the barriers around the garden, have stopped the precipitation runoff from entering the pond. As a result, the pond gradually disappeared. This is clearly observable in the later satellite images taken from the region. Hence, the time of destruction dated between 1973 and 1978. Now that we have found the locations of the spring and pond, we can focus on locating the last and most important spatial feature Ghadeer Khumm has to offer, the mosque. This mosque was built upon the location of the Prophet's pulpit, where he delivered his sermon at Ghadeer Khumm. Muslims built this mosque to honor the Prophet's presence and sermon in this land. The mosque of Ghadeer Khumm has repeatedly been destroyed and rebuilt throughout history. The destruction was carried out by rulers such as Muawiyah, whose intentions were to erase any sign of Imam Ali's status and legacy. Natural disasters throughout history, such as floods, could also have contributed to the mosque's destruction. However, Shias and the followers of Imam Ali and the Ahlul Bayt did not forget this holy site. They continually rebuilt the mosque of Ghadeer Khumm after each destruction. Historically, Shia imams and scholars have frequently professed a high reward for prayer within the mosque of Ghadeer Khumm. and have encouraged Muslims to attend this mosque for prayer. For example, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam stopped by the Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm during his travels from Medina to Mecca and described the details of the sermon at Ghadeer Khumm to his companions. Sheikh Gulaini, Sheikh Saduq, Sheikh Tusi, Alam Helli, and Shahid Awal also serve as examples of great Shia scholars who have discussed the importance of the Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm in their books. The last historical record of Ghadeer Khumm's mosque belongs to Sheikh Muhaddas Nuri, a Shia scholar who visited the mosque during his Hajj travel with his teacher, Sayyid Mahdi Ghazvini Halli. They prayed in this mosque before 1300 Hijri, 1883 of the Gregorian calendar. After this record, there is an abrupt lack of historical evidence about the Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm. Atiq ibn Ghais Biladi and Sheikh Abdul Hadi Fazli did not find any trace of this holy mosque in their field observations. Finding the exact location of the Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm is a daunting task, as about 150 years have passed since its last destruction. An independent field investigation is required. However, our efforts to locate this holy site led to the discovery of ruins in the vicinity by the pond of Ghadeer Khumm. This holy site could be the traces of the missing Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm that was built at the landmark of the Holy Prophet's pulpit, where he delivered his important sermon. Historical narrations regarding the description of the sermon at Ghadeer Khumm explicitly mention that upon arrival at Ghadeer Khumm, the Holy Prophet banned the Muslims from landing under 5 giant trees in this land. The Prophet then ordered to build a pulpit for him under these 5 trees. With such a dry climate in this region, these trees could only have existed near the pond of Ghadeer Khumm. Therefore, the Mosque of Ghadeer Khumm would be in the vicinity of the pond, which is consistent with the location of these ruins. The few available videos from the ruins of Ghadeer Khumm's mosque clearly indicate the destruction of this holy site.
ये जो है गदीर खुम का मसल्ला हो सकता है। लोकेशन डॉक्टर अहमद नोमानी के हिसाब से जो जगह बनती है शायद वो यही है। और ये पुराने कुछ पत्थर भी यहाँ पड़े हुए हैं और ये मेहराब लग रही है। क़िबले की डायरेक्शन अभी देख लेते हैं। ये हम लोग गदीर खुम के मकाम पे हैं, जो कि राबिक की मेन रोड से तकरीबन 5 से 10 किलोमीटर अंदर आने के बाद राइट हैंड पे ये सामने जो हिजाज़ रेलवे का आपको ट्रैक नज़र आ रहा है, इसके साथ ही ये मुकाम है। और ग़ालिबन हमारी क़यास है कि शायद ये वो मस्जिद है जहाँ हुज़ूर अकरम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने नमाज़ पढ़ी थी। आइए इस मस्जिद को हम पूरा दिखाते हैं आपको आगे तक। इंशाअल्लाह ये जगह वही है और ये ऊंचाई पे भी है। हुज़ूर अकरम सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के जो भी मुसल्ले होते थे उनकी वो थोड़ा ऊंचाई पे होते थे। और ये देखें यहाँ शायद फेंसिंग भी लगाई गई थी, तो ये पड़ी हुई है। और वो जो पत्थर मेन महराब का नज़र आ रहा है उसकी डायरेक्शन अगर आप देखें तो बिल्कुल क़िबला रुख है। इसकी डायरेक्शन जो है क़िबला रुख।
Ghadeer Khumm's current estate is far removed from its historical glory and greatness. Unfortunately, there are covert plots to remove all existing features from its holy grounds. This is a systematic effort to erase its historical significance. First, Ghadeer Khumm's mosque was raised so that no pilgrim seeking divine reward could benefit from their visit and prayer. Next, Ghadeer Khumm's pond was dried and destroyed, so that no one could locate Ghadeer Khumm based on its distinguishing landmarks amidst the desert. Finally, the spring, which served as the last defining feature of Ghadeer Khumm, was demolished. Despite this and all other attempts to remove these features from the holy site, Ghadeer Khumm is alive and lives on in the memory of Muslims. This would not be possible without the wisdom of the Holy Prophet in choosing this land for his crucial sermon. He diverted the Muslims about 5 kilometers in their travel route from Mecca to Medina to stop by the pond of Ghadeer Khumm, a place previously unknown to them. They stayed overnight to swear allegiance and complete the event ceremony, as planned by the Prophet. The Holy Prophet's design was so effective that his critical sermon was named after this unique landmark, and the memory of his sermon endured forever. The Prophet's sermon still echoes on and is heard from every corner of this holy land.